Well, hello, friends. It is Friday, November 20th, and good to connect with you here today. I just want to let you know next Friday I will not be doing a video message because, given that it's the day after Thanksgiving, I'm going to be spending time with my family, my crew here, and imagine some of you might be doing similar things like that and just having time together. So, or just enjoying a day off from work or any of those things. So, I just wanted to let you know that I'll get back to doing video messages the following Friday, but definitely wanted to send one out here today. So, what I want to talk about today, I've been thinking about this pretty much this whole week, is about interruptions. Interruptions. Sometimes, if you're like me, you don't particularly enjoy interruptions in the day. We all have those. We have kind of our schedule for the day, our plan for the day, and then oftentimes it gets interrupted. That's happened for a lot of people. Kind of all the humorous things with people working from home and being on Zoom calls and video conferences and all that, and you see kids interrupting or pets interrupting who come into the frame and cause an interruption. And that used to be kind of this taboo thing. Don't have your kid walk in on your video conference. Now, I think it's pretty much accepted. Everyone expects a kid could show up any day. I was talking with a guy yesterday, a pastor in Minnesota, on a Zoom call, and shortly into it, in comes his kid, jumps on his lap, and gets sent back out. And last week, or a couple weeks ago, my video message, my cat jumped up on the chair. Those are interruptions, and I like that those aren't seen as this like bad thing anymore. That it's just life, and people are all in the same boat. We're all in the same boat together in this amidst this pandemic, and I just think that's a good thing. So that's kind of an aside, but just in terms of interruptions, I think we all have those. We all experience those in our daily lives. And I think there are some people who welcome the interruptions and others who don't so much. I think in some ways, maybe extroverts welcome those. I mean, if they're busy on a task and someone walks in and interrupts them, I think sometimes they're like, sweet, it's a good thing. They welcome that interruption. They can stop and they can be social. Sometimes more for those like me, on the introvert scale, you're kind of working on something. If you get interrupted, sometimes it can be frustrating. I was in the middle of something and I don't want social interaction right now. I just want to focus. So it can go either way. But it's a part of life, right? Interruptions are a part of life. And I've heard before from, I think, multiple times in my life and in my ministry, and I can't remember even from whom I've heard this, but that ministry takes place in the interruptions. Ministry takes place in the normal planned out stuff as well, but oftentimes some of the best ministry takes place in the interruptions. When you're working on something, maybe you're, as a pastor, working on a sermon, thinking, I got to get this done. And there is importance for that quiet time and being able to be in God's word and be able to be prepared to proclaim the gospel and share what the Spirit has stirred in you about your time in the Word. But sometimes then you get interrupted while you're doing that. And I know for me, oftentimes it's like, I'm trying to focus. but oftentimes sometimes interruptions can be for very mundane things. And I think that's where it gets frustrating. But oftentimes it's because somebody needs something. And there's something happening that demands attention in that moment. And while we might be so caught up in what we're doing that we might get frustrated or feel like, no, I don't have time for that, I think oftentimes that's when, for those of us like me in ministry, great ministry happens in those moments. A great example of that is Jesus, when you read the Gospels, there's all these interruptions. Now, for Jesus, those weren't unknown. He knew that those were going to happen, which we don't, right, when interruptions come. But nevertheless, we see kind of the trajectory of the narrative in the Gospels where Jesus is going about his business, going from one place to the next. He has an agenda. He's doing things. And then we see these interruptions, like, for example, the woman who's had the flow of blood for 12 years or 18 years. I'm blanking on the time frame now, but grabs onto the hem of his garment, right? It's an interruption. And Jesus says, who did that? And even though he's amidst this crowd that's just pressing against him, but then he takes time to engage with this woman and he ends up healing her. And it's those moments in the Gospels. Oftentimes there are these healing stories and things like that with Jesus where, again, Jesus could have said, don't bother me, I'm busy, I have an agenda. I mean, talk about someone who had an agenda, God in the flesh, who had come to redeem the world. But Jesus isn't too busy for those moments. He stops, he takes time, he engages, and it changes that woman's life, and it impacts others as well. And that's why I've heard, kind of drawing on that, I've heard people say ministry takes place in the interruptions, just like for Jesus. And I thought, there's a lot of wisdom in that. Again, there's a discerning piece about, is an interruption because there's truly a need, like for that woman, or is it just people have very mundane things that can wait, and sometimes people can become very demanding of our time, and that's not always a helpful thing. So there's a discerning piece in there, but I think that's really important, and I've tried to think of that. And so, but that's not just true in ministry, right? That's true for any of us, that we have our plans for the day, for our lives, and then interruptions happen. And again, like I say, there's that discerning piece of trying to say, okay, is this worth me stopping what I was doing, which may be very important to engage, or is this something where I can say, hey, let's circle back around when I'm done? Sometimes you need to do that. Sometimes you need to say no, or later, or not yet, those kinds of things. But I think we need to be not resistant to those interruptions when they come, because oftentimes there's incredible moments of engagement, of relationships, of, like I say, with your kids, if you have kids or grandkids and you're in the middle of something, they interrupt. We all do it. Oh, I don't have time for that now. I'm working on something. But for that little heart, that moment is everything. And if we stop, even for just a moment, and acknowledge them and engage with them, it can have a huge impact on their little lives, and on us as well. So that's kind of the small scale stuff. Then there's, even though those are big things, those small interruptions. Then there's big major interruptions like we're dealing with right now. We started out in 2020 thinking, hey, this is going to be a great year, 2020 vision, big plans, and then the pandemic hit. Talk about an interruption. It's been a huge interruption. The biggest one, I would say most of us, many of us, I know for me, have experienced in our lifetime, where our normal routine has been radically interrupted, drastically interrupted. And that's really hard. And it's really easy to try to just fight against that, push back against that, resist that, just be frustrated and upset because we had these great plans and now it's interrupted, and it keeps being interrupted. I mean, now we're in this kind of third wave of the pandemic, and it's like, when can it just be done and we can get back to what we had planned? That's understandable. It's so natural, and we all feel that. I know I feel that oftentimes. But what I'm trying to reflect on, I've been doing that this week, is when interruptions come, to say, okay, what can I learn from this? What is the opportunity here? Now, I'm not saying that every interruption is some godsend. The pandemic, for example, I don't think it's that God put this pandemic on us. We live in this fallen, broken world where disease and pandemics and all those things are part of it, and it came. And so I don't want to kind of just say, well, so now we have this great opportunity, and disregard the fact that 250,000 Americans have lost their lives, as well as countless others around the globe. I mean, that's horrible, absolutely, and that's such a devastating interruption for so many people. But in spite of that, while we acknowledge that fully, I do think there's opportunity in the midst of this pandemic to say, okay, this is a major interruption. What is the opportunity here? I think that's true individually, for sure. I really think that's true as a church. I just keep being convinced of that everything I've read and been hearing on podcasts and articles and all these things is that the church has been in decline. That's just a reality. Church in America, for sure. And the pandemic has only accelerated that. It's not that everything was perfect, the pandemic hit, and now things are rough. Things were rough before. The pandemic has just sped everything up. It's accelerated decline of churches as well. And so we have to see it as, we have to embrace it as an opportunity to rethink, to change, to pivot, to shift wherever necessary. And that's not just true of the church, that's true of businesses, that's true of our relationships and our lives and school and everything that's being impacted right now. So I just lift all that up. I just want to share one verse that really speaks to this. Proverbs 19:21. Proverbs 19:21. Many are the plans in a person's heart, but it is the Lord's purpose that prevails. Now that can be kind of big picture, like, oh, I have all these grand plans for my life, and then God has other plans. That's true oftentimes, right? We can't see the big picture and what we think we're going to do. I mean, for a lot of us, we might say, I never thought I was going to be a pastor's kid, third generation pastor, all that, but I didn't see that as the plan for my life. God's plans, God's purposes prevail, okay? Case in point. But so that can be big picture stuff, but I also think it can be on this small scale that happen every day that, I have plans for this day. Here's what I'm going to be about today. And then there are these interruptions. Sometimes, like I say, aren't of God. They can be disruptions. They can be really negative things. But oftentimes I think there are those divine interruptions where I think God is behind it. And when it happens, then it's, okay, here's an opportunity to learn, to grow, to enact the will of God, to share the gospel, to extend love to someone, or grace, or mercy, or forgiveness, whatever it is. I think there are all these opportunities amidst interruptions to discern and live into God's purposes. So I lift all that up today, just simply, I guess, to interrupt your day with this message, to simply say this, that I guess when it comes to our plans for our lives, but even just for our days, and especially in this time right now, to just say, to hold those loosely. And it's good to plan, it's good to schedule out and all those kinds of things. I think that's a healthy thing, and be organized and all that, but hold it loosely still and say, all right, I'm gonna leave room for God's purposes. I'm gonna leave room for interruptions. When they come, I'm not going to resist them or say, well, this is getting in the way of my plans, but rather say, maybe this is God's purposes at work here, and I need to step into this moment, especially when you can see there's a need for engagement with another person, a kid, a grandkid, a person in need, whatever it is. So I encourage you in that, and then I encourage you the big picture to see this pandemic, the huge, massive interruption that it is. Take it seriously, mourn for those who mourn, right? But also see it as an opportunity to say, I was talking to people the other day, we're talking about Three Rivers Christian School, about things that used to matter. The gal said, things that used to matter to me, I realized just don't matter anymore. Perspective, right? We were talking about hindsight is 2020. That has a whole new meaning now. But I think it's true. 2020 has caused us to really reevaluate. It's changed our perspective. And I think just be willing to say, okay, this interruption is an opportunity to rethink, to reevaluate, to reprioritize in my life. Maybe that's the most important thing, to say, all right, I need to keep God at the top, otherwise I'll just be so anxious and worried and going crazy. He's in control. Having your family really just next in line so that you're not taking that for granted. And then just all the other things in our lives, our work, our ministries, our passions, all those kinds of things that we can step into. So I hope that encourages you somewhat today. Like I said, I've just been thinking about that. And I should say that I talked about when I'm working in my office on a sermon, and an interruption can be frustrating at times, please know if you happen to be at church and there's something on your heart, please interrupt. I will happily welcome that. If I don't, you can point back to this video and say, remember when you said we could interrupt. But also know that there are those times, Pastor Dave and me or anyone else, when we're working hard on something, if it's not an urgent thing, maybe hold off on the interruptions so we can keep that work going. But I just want you to know, I do welcome those, and trying to again get back to that piece that I've been thinking of more and more, that ministry, engagement, life takes place often in the interruptions. So may this be a great weekend for you, and next week, especially with Thanksgiving, of just taking stock of things in your life and being grateful in spite of everything going on for this interruption and the ways in which I think it's causing us and forcing us to reevaluate and to take stock and to reprioritize. So God bless you, friends. See some of you on Sunday, I'm sure, and others see you through the live stream and through KLTV or however you connect. And I just pray that it's like I say, a great weekend and Thanksgiving week for you. God bless you.